I'm Jacob Seelman.
And I'm Tom Baker.
You're listening to Speed77 Radio,
powered by Race Chaser Online.
We are your home for motorsports.
All right, which lane?
Himself into rarefied air as a four-time Daytona Supercross winner.
Pole in one for the captain, checkered flag for Keselowski.
We're back, and it's an all-new edition of Motorsports Madness here tonight on Speed77 Radio and Race Chaser Online. We're glad you're along for the ride, and we've got a lot on tap from Sin City to the West Coast to Daytona Supercross action from Caraway and much, much more. It's going to be a wild hour or so of motorsports here on Speed77 Radio and Race Chaser Online, and as always, we're glad you're along for the ride. Good evening, everyone, and once again, welcome back here to Motorsports Madness on Speed77 Radio. I'm Jacob Seelman alongside my co-host and colleague here at the round table, Tom Baker. James Pike is off tonight. Tom, first off, as we get ready to roll into another Monday night here, certainly been an exciting weekend from around the world of motorsports with a lot of moments that made the highlight reels over the course of the race weekend. Certainly left us with a lot to talk about and a lot to scratch our heads at, too.
Yeah, really. That's a great way to put it, too. Some of us scratching our heads, and some of us probably really not surprised at some of the things that took place, both nationally and also locally and regionally here in the South. Things heating up, if you will, on the local and regional scene. Some of the tracks starting to unpack and open the gates and get some racing in, and we're going to bounce around a little bit from NASCAR to local stuff and regional stuff to open wheel stuff and even two-wheel stuff as well. We've got a lot of diversity to cover here in an hour.
Yeah, we do, and I'm looking forward to it, so let's not put any of it off, and let's go ahead and get started here this evening with, as always, recap from the Fender world, and this week specifically, Sin City. NASCAR traveling to the glitz and glamour of Las Vegas for the weekend, concluding their first West Coast swing, if you will, in Phoenix last week, in Vegas this week, and certainly the weekend in Vegas left a lot of interesting moments and a lot of drivers looking at two cars at the front of the field wondering, okay, what do we have to do to beat these guys, especially in qualifying when the green flag fell on Sunday, just like in Phoenix for the second week in a row with knockout qualifying, Team Penske on the front row.
Yeah, Team Penske seems to enjoy the knockout qualifying format and have adapted to it quite nicely. Some of the other teams look like they're going to have to play a little catch-up here, but boy, Brad and Joey have got it down.
Yeah, they do, and they led the field to the green flag in reverse order of how they were a week ago at Phoenix. Joey Logano scoring his first Coors Light Pole Award of the season and locking himself into next season's Sprint Unlimited at Daytona. But his teammate Keselowski would be the one making all the storylines in Sin City, Tom. It was quite the weekend for Brad. We'll get back to his exploits on Saturday in just a moment, but the big show on Sunday, Keselowski missed the chase last year. Well, he may have golden punched his way to this year's chase for the NASCAR Sprint Cup by virtue of his exploits on the final lap in Las Vegas. He gets around Dale Earnhardt Jr. when the car sputters. Earnhardt stays out on a late race fuel gamble. It comes up exactly like Steve Letarte said it would, a half to 3/4 of a lap short. He runs out coming down the back straightaway. Keselowski gets just enough to get by and holds on for the win. First ever last lap pass in a Cup race at Las Vegas, and Brad Keselowski crosses another track off his Cup Series to-do list with his first win in Sin City. Likely back in the chase. How big a win is this for the Blue Deuce and that entire Penske operation?
Well, in this case, it was a white deuce. The old Blanco deuce kind of main ski. But yeah, it was definitely a big win for them. And look, I think that we're seeing a bit of a pattern here, aren't we, Jacob? I mean, it seems to me as though this new chase format has actually already had a very positive effect in the sense that because drivers know it when they're in, they seem to not mind taking risks. It just seems like we're seeing a lot more chances being taken in different situations now. And I think as we get further into the season and more drivers qualify for the chase by winning a race, we're actually going to see some pretty crazy things as we get into the second half, I would suspect.
I would suspect it too, and it's all about risk versus reward. And any race fans who are listening tonight, if you keep an ear out and an eye out on racechaseronline.com this week, I'll be having my next Speed Zone blog post on this very topic, risk versus reward. And you're absolutely right. We are seeing guys take risks like they never would have taken before. We saw Joey Logano take a risk, try to stuff it 3 wide in Phoenix to get around Kevin Harvick for the victory. We saw Junior gamble on fuel. We saw a couple guys gamble and stay out on a late race pit stop in the Daytona 500. We're seeing these guys when you know a win either means bonus points if you've already got one, or it means you're likely in the chase for the Sprint Cup. All you got to do is win, and we're seeing these guys go for these wins like they never would have before. It used to be all about points racing. Now it's all about getting to that checkered flag first. But Keselowski's exploits did not just go beyond the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series, Tom. Yes, he won in the Sprint Cup Series, but oh, by the way, that race on Saturday that I mentioned a minute ago, he won that too and took the American flag for a ride in the Discount Tire number 22 Penske machine on Saturday afternoon. It's the first time ever that Keselowski has weekend swept at Las Vegas and the first driver to do it since Carl Edwards several years back. Is this weekend, so to speak, exactly what the captain ordered for BK after missing the chase last year?
Yeah, obviously, anytime you can sweep a weekend, it's a big deal. And anytime you beat Kyle Busch in a nationwide race, it's a big deal as well. So definitely Brad really enjoying a very successful weekend. It's a great boost to the confidence, I'm sure, and it gets Team Penske back on the right track. Now, having said that, I meant to actually make a note of this earlier, but I read something somewhere that said that they one of the shocks from the Penske car, and I believe it was from the Cup car on Sunday, so I wouldn't be surprised to see some sort of a penalty be handed out. I know they're going to look at it, not sure exactly what the nature of the infraction might be, but we might keep our eyes out for a possible penalty against that race team as early as tomorrow. So, of course, the news all good right now, but may not be so good in a day or two.
It may not be. And actually, Brad Keselowski's Penske Racing machine failed inspection on Saturday, along with Chase Elliott's number 9 machine. Elliott's car was too low in post-race inspection, and they did take a shock, I believe a right rear shock from that number 22 Keselowski machine. So it's going to be interesting to see. Under this new penalty system, it could be up to 10 points or as much as $12,000 in fines for both of those teams under the new system. So going to be really interesting. This is the first test of NASCAR's new deterrence system, as they're calling it. So we'll see what NASCAR rules on that, and going to be, again, very interesting to see what Robin John Pemberton and the rest of the guys in the R&D Center have to say, because this is the first time since NASCAR completely revamped that penalty system that we're going to see it in action.
Yeah, it is the first time, and thank you for clarifying that was Saturday. I couldn't remember if it was Saturday or Sunday where that infraction allegedly happened. So we'll have to see how it works out, but certainly a great weekend on the track for the Penske team and for Brad Keselowski especially, and a real momentum builder going forward here. He knows he's in the chase now, and it's really going to allow them. I think Brad and Paul Wolf are chance takers to begin with. They're very risk-taking type people, so it could be very fun to watch what they do in some of the races coming up here between now and the rest of the season. They like to hang it out once in a while, so this could be an interesting momentum shift for the two team.
Yeah, it could be. Let's go back to the Cup race for a minute while we've got the chance to, because not only was it a good weekend for Brad Keselowski, who got the race win, but talk about the guy who was leading at the white flag and finished second for the second week in a row, and it's the third time he's been on the podium in 3 races this year, 5 straight top 5s going back to last season. How about this run so far by Dale Earnhardt Jr., who leads the points, albeit by only a single marker over Keselowski, but Jr. off to the best start of his Sprint Cup career and has put himself in rarefied air by doing something, i.e., 3 top 2s in the first 3 races that only 5 drivers in the 65-year history of the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series have ever done. Junior's on a roll. The question's going to be, can he keep it going forward? But Tom, I don't think I've ever seen Dale Earnhardt Jr. look this good, this long, dating back to last season. That 88 team, if we didn't think they were going to be a threat before, they have to be considered a threat now.
Well, there's no question. I think that after the first 3 races of the season, you have to consider Junior a favorite to win the championship. He really is on a roll right now. And here again, they took a risk, and it almost paid off for him. I mean, he was, half a lap short. So, I mean, it really is. This is starting off to be a real breakout year for Junior, and I think a lot of us sense that, just the way that Daytona went for him. And the way that he drove that race, I mean, Junior's in a very good place in his life off the track right now, and that is definitely putting him in a much better place on it than what he's been in other years in the past. And I just think that this has all of the shadings of a very season for the 88 team, and the Junior Motorsports nationwide team is very competitive. Regan Smith leading the points now, I think just by a point in that series, or of a few points. And he, again, that team, Chase Elliott, Regan, and whoever has been in the 88 car all the way through, all of those cars have been front runners and highly competitive. So I certainly would think that this is poised to be a very special year in the career of Dale Jr.
One more nugget before we take our first caution flag of the evening here. An announcement came down Sunday morning that I wasn't expecting at all, but it certainly could have long-term ramifications on the Sprint Cup Series. How about the announcement that came out Sunday morning that Dylan Kwasniewski has been signed to a development contract, just like Kyle Larson was with Chip Ganassi Racing? You want to talk about investing for the future. All of a sudden, you've got 2 of the top young prospects in NASCAR racing. Kyle Larson, who's made it to the Cup Series this year, and Kwasniewski, who a lot of people have said is destined to get there. These 2, I've seen them work well together at Turner Scott Motorsports, and I tell you what, I don't think Kwasniewski's going to be ready for a Cup ride next year, but certainly Chip Ganassi prepping himself maybe to have 2 young guys in his seat, but I would almost assume, knowing that Kwasniewski brings sponsorship money with him, that this could be a potential for an expansion out of that CGR team for maybe 2016, put Kwasniewski in a 3rd Chip Ganassi Cup car and see that team possibly return to prominence. Tom, what do you think of the announcement that Ganassi's poached another one away from some of the other Cup team owners?
I think it's a great deal for Chip, because if at some point Chip does decide to stay with only 2 cars and he decides to let Jamie McMurray seek employment elsewhere, he won't have to change any of the stand-ups or anything else, because I don't know about you, but I look at the picture of Dylan Kwasniewski that when with Chip there in the press conference, he looks an awful lot like Jamie, same hair and all.
He does, and he's very proud of the hair, too, but...
you can tell he's very proud of the hair. He rocks the hair.
He does. He rocks the sunglasses, too, and certainly looks like he's going to be rocking them for quite a while, possibly at the Cup level here very, very soon. A big day for Dylan Kwasniewski, and hopefully get a chance to...
Jake, I'm just sitting here thinking that could be an interesting trick. They look so much alike. I mean, you get them both up there in Cup. They could just swap cars and see if anybody actually knows the difference.
Wonder Twins, a little bit.
Exactly.
Big announcement for Kwasniewski. Certainly a big day for Chip Ganassi Racing as a whole. And that's going to be a storyline that we hope to follow up with here in a couple weeks. Reached out to Dylan. We're going to see what comes of that. I'm very interested in hearing his take on where his career's going, and keep it tuned to Race Chaser Online, and we'll see if we don't have a little bit more information from the man himself coming up shortly. But for now, we're going to take our first caution flag of the evening, and when we come back, we're going to talk short track racing from Caraway. The Whelen Southern Modified Tour was in action over the weekend, along with late model action and much, much more. So we move to the short track world next on The Madness. You're listening to Speed 77 Radio and Race Chaser Online, and we'll be right back after this.
My very first movie, it was called British Terabithia, and that was a film that a lot of kids loved.
From IamSecond.com.
It felt very cool in my heart to know that I did something nice.
Actress Bailey Madison.
I don't want it to be about me, I want it to be about God. Even though you have an earth father, he is your father, that you can say to him, God, I'm not feeling too well today. Or if it's just, little things like, I feel homesick, or I need you, Lord, I need to feel happiness in my heart. The most important thing is you have to have hope, you have to have faith. God is with you, and God is with you every step of the way. If you give yourself to God and you say, I'm ready to commit myself to you, you will know that God is watching you. He looks down and he goes, I'm very, very happy with what you just did. My name is Bailey Madison, and I am second.
Did you know that most teens who drink alcohol get it from people they know? Usually their friends or family members. But regardless of where they get it, alcohol puts teens at risk for injury, to themselves and to others. You can help make it a safe summer for the teens you know. Don't serve them alcohol. It's unsafe, it's illegal, and it's irresponsible. Find out more at don'tserveteens.gov. That's don'tserveteens.gov. A message from the Federal Trade Commission and this station.
I'm Jacob Seelman.
And I'm Tom Baker.
You're listening to Speed 77 Radio,
Powered by Race Chaser Online.
We are your home for motorsports. Welcome back to Motorsports Madness here on Speed 77 Radio and RaceChaserOnline.com. Jacob Seelman and Tom Baker around tonight's roundtable. And Tom, you actually got a chance to head somewhere this weekend that I very much would have liked to join you for, because modified racing returns to the South, and short track racing in general getting started this weekend with several of the NASCAR home tracks opening their seasons. Hickory Speedway, Caraway Speedway among them this weekend. Caraway was where all the action was at, though. The NASCAR Whelen Southern Modified Tour was in action for their season opener, 150 laps for the Whelen 150, and you want to talk about somebody else that's on a roll, not just Dale Earnhardt Jr., but Andy Seiss as well. Going back to last season, that young man has won now 4 of the last 5 Southern Modified Tour events, and that record included a big win on Sunday afternoon in the season opener. He's won 3 straight now in the Southern Mods at Caraway, and I didn't think I'd say this, but we have a challenger for Georgie Brunhosel for the 2014 Southern Modified Tour Championship if Andy Seiss has something to say about it.
Well, now that you did all the step boy work for me, I won't have to spend my time reciting all those stats, so I'll just talk about what it was like to watch, which was flawless. That would be the one word I would use to describe Andy's performance at Caraway on Sunday afternoon, flawless. And first of all, let me just get up in the air about 10,000 feet and do a quick overview here. It was a beautiful day on Sunday, and actually it was a beautiful weekend in the greater Charlotte, Asheboro, Raleigh, North Carolina area. Just a great weekend in the South, temperatures in the 70s, and just a great day to be at the racetrack. And the crowd was one of the best crowds I've seen at Caraway in quite a while. Really appreciate the hospitality of Jason Cunningham and all the folks from the NASCAR Whelen Southern Modified Tour to help me out with the stats and all the information that I needed. Andy Seiss, of course, qualified. He and J.R. Bertuccio started in the front row, and those two took off. And basically, for most of the first half of the race, it was the two of them. Georgie got to third, and they had a few caution flags here and there. Georgie got to third, but didn't really challenge too much. You got the sense he was basically saving it for later in the race, but he eventually did get his shot at second place and a shot to challenge Andy, but nobody was going to challenge Andy on this day. He much dominated it and took home the win, and good for him. There were some other drivers who I thought did really excellent jobs. Race, of course, Bertuccio and Brunhosel both, and want to give a nod to Danny Bone as well in the 65. Ran in the top 5 for pretty much the entire race, and really had a good showing for the first race out, and loves Caraway and loves the Southern Mod Tour. And of course, Jacob, the Myers brothers. Anytime there is one Myers in the field, let alone two, show is going to be. Bert started 16th, and for the first half of the race, it was basically a Bert Myers show watching him come through the field. And before I knew it, he was knocking on the back door of the top 5. And then after the second half, he was in it. Jason Meyer there as well, so want to give both of them a shout out. Joe Ryan Osborne, young racer running the full season, first full year on the Southern Mod Tour, ran in the top 5 for quite a while and then faded. And he and young Spencer Davis in the Hillbilly Racing car, both looking, on the back edge of the top 10 at the end of the race. And those two are young drivers who I think we're going to be hearing more about on the Southern Mod Tour. I don't know if Spencer's going to run the entire schedule, but very talented young racers who are going to have an awful lot to say, I think, about some wins and some top 5 runs here as we get into the second half of the season once they get used to the cars and used to the tracks. I know that Joe Ryan did some last year, Jacob, but this year certainly first full season, and I expect him to make a lot of progress in a hurry.
Yeah, and he actually started off real strong. Got the top 10 finish in his Southern Modified Tour debut. Finished 10th. Spencer Davis right behind him in 11th. You talked about the Myers brothers. They end up in the top 5 at the end of the day, finishing nose to tail. Coincidentally, Bert 4th and Jason 5th. Brunhosel finishes 2nd, but I know he wanted more. The owner of 10 career Southern Modified Tour victories at Caraway, but couldn't get the season opening win this year like he did a year ago. You were talking about that 79 car, the Hillbilly Racing Machine, though. I want to talk about not the current driver, but a former driver of that machine, because he made some waves in the short track world as well. We'll get back to some more action from Caraway in a minute, but real quickly, talk about Daniel Hemrick and the Pass South race this weekend from Dillon Motor Speedway, the South Carolina Clash. Hemrick, who won the season opener at Greenville Pickens last week. You want to talk about right place, right time. This is another race that had right place, right time rubber stamped all over it and was Daniel's for the taking at the finish. He survives a couple of major crashes that wiped out a good portion of the field, makes his move when it counts, gets to victory lane for the 4th time in his Pass South career, 2nd straight to start the season. This time, though, he did it with the team that we're most used to seeing him with in the past series, the number 98 Carswell Motorsports machine. Tom, we've watched Daniel Hemric dominate over the last couple years, and I know these wins anymore don't necessarily come as a surprise, but I was so impressed by the job he did working his way through the field at Dillon over the weekend after having to survive what many people call an epic crash fest at Dillon Motor Speedway.
Yeah, I saw something on Facebook with a picture of one of the crashes attached to it, and it said something about the event being, or something about the race being eventful. Yeah, it was definitely a crash fest, and again, a lot of times on the short tracks like that, that's just what happens. I mean, the drivers get a little over aggressive and don't respect each other enough. Especially as it gets into the second half of the race, everybody's trying to win it with 30 laps to go. Daniel is the type of driver who just isn't going to push the issue. If you want a model of what being a race car driver is on a short track, I would suggest you watch Daniel Hemric. He's up front anywhere and everywhere he races, no matter what he races in. This is the second car that he has won with in the Past South Series this year, and there have only been 2 races. I think he should just, go off and drive random cars and see how many different cars he can put in victory lane. The kid is just, he's got a lot of race craft, and what I mean by that is he's not about to push the issue. He doesn't make high-risk moves. He just is very methodical, and he's very confident in what he can do. He's got the equipment to run up front. He doesn't try to force things. And that's why Daniel Hemric is fighting for wins every time he's in a race car. And you're right, you talk about him in the Hillbilly 79, it was the same situation there. He was up front, he was in the top 5, top 6, everywhere he went, whether he'd seen the track or not. Daniel is a wheelman, and somebody needs to be putting him in something in the NASCAR major leagues pretty quick, because they're missing out on, I think, one of the most special talented racers that we've seen come through in a long time. And I know he doesn't bring a ton of money with him, but boy, somebody needs to put this boy, not a boy anymore, he's in his early 20s now, but somebody needs to put this young man in a truck or in a Nationwide Series car and turn him loose, because he'll make somebody a very happy car owner.
Yeah, I do agree with you wholeheartedly on that one. You want to talk about a guy who had heartbreak. Gus Dean led 137 of the 151 laps. That means Hemric took it on a green-white checker, by the way. Faded around lap 138, 139. Cole Tim gets by him, and then Hemric makes the race-winning pass with 2 to go. You talked about the crashes, though. Jody Meismer goes for a wild ride, a pretty scary ride, barrel rolls upside down multiple times on the front straightaway, landed on all 4 wheels, stuck the landing kind of like Clint Boyer did at Daytona a few races ago. But Garrett Campbell, Matt Daly involved in that, Tate Fogelman taken out in that one after he slammed the wall hard coming off turn 4. Not the birthday present that Tate Fogelman wanted. That young man really performing well in a late model, but just had a tough night there exiting the race early.
It was more like when you give him a cake with exploding candles on it.
Very, very true. So Hemric gets the win at Dillon. The Past South Tour going to resume in a couple weeks. But let's go back to Caraway now, because besides just the Southern Modified Tour race, Tom, very exciting late model race out there as well, taking place at Caraway before the Southern Mod Tour race, and that one had just about as many storylines.
Yeah, it did, Jacob. And Robert Tyler qualified on the pole, and Tommy Lemons Jr. started next to him. Now, Tommy Lemons is a driver that you would just expect when the green flag comes out, he's going to get the lead, especially if you put him on the end at Caraway. That's exactly what happened. But he only led for a couple of laps, I think about 4 laps. Then Tyler got underneath him, went by, and once Tyler got the lead, he never gave it up again. Robert did a great job, but it was by no means a dominating performance. Lemons ran second almost the entire race and had a litany of cars that were challenging him for that spot. BJ Mackey challenged him early, then he went out about lap 46, and you had Mike Darn up there, and then he went out about the same time Mackey did. So all of a sudden, who was sitting in third after about 58 laps or so of the 100-lap race, but the spark plug, Dylan Bassett. And you could tell that Dylan, he was just kind of sitting back there. He not really anxious to press again like Daniel Hemrick, just kind of biding his time. But boy, as 60 became 70, he took off. And he got by Tommy Lemons on, I think, lap 64. And then Tommy actually got back by him for a little bit. And Dylan took to lap 96, got under him off turn 4 again, passed him, and closed right in on the 88 of Robert Tyler. And boy, on the last lap, going through turns 3 and 4, coming to the checker, Dylan Bassett gave him a shot in the back end. And I think everybody saw something disastrous coming, but Tyler did a good job saving and maintaining control of the car. It gave Dylan just enough momentum to get underneath him, though, and they drag raced to the line. Dylan lost by half a length. That was a really good race. I mean, they had a few caution flags, banged up some equipment, but it was a good race. Robert Tyler getting the win. Tommy Lemons Jr., Dylan Bassett getting second. Lemons in third. The 12 of Ryan Wilson finished fourth, and the 83 of Matt Bowling finished in fifth. It was a really good late model stock race. Congratulations also to Brandon McKenzie, who picked up the win over Kyle Beatty and Blake Spears in the Companion Legends race. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to hang out long enough for the limited late model race because I host and lead Bible study on Sunday nights, so I had to rush back and be in place for that. But definitely saw 3 good races at Caraway, and want to thank the folks at Caraway Speedway for their hospitality again, and just really enjoy getting out to see some racing. Also caught Harris Speedway's open practice on Saturday, one of the local dirt tracks here outside of Charlotte with a lot of history to it. Used to be a NASCAR track. Richard Petty and Ned Jarrett both getting wins at Harris, so that kind of gives you a point of reference for that track. It's been around since the 50s, and it was kind of fun to be able to go do that on Saturday and then switch to the pavement and go see that show at Caraway on Sunday. So all in all, a good weekend and a great lid lifter for the Southern Mod Tour. Just a really, really good show. 19 cars, and looks like that's going to be pretty much a consistent number, 19 to 20 cars, and that's more than enough. And there's more than enough depth in the field to put on a great show at any track they go to.
That's exactly right, and it's going to be really interesting to see the Southern Mod Tour back in action this weekend at Southern National Motorsports Park in Kenly, North Carolina for race 2 of their 2014 season, and Andy Seiss going to be looking to dethrone Burt Myers, who is the king of Southern National, so to speak, the only driver with multiple wins up at that racetrack in the Southern Mod Tour. So Seiss going to be looking for 2 in a row. Burt Myers going to be looking to reclaim his title at SNMP, and Georgie Brunozl just looking to get the points lead in his search for a 5th Southern Mod Tour championship. But for now, we are going to take our next caution flag of the evening, and when we come back, we're going to sit down and talk some dirt action. Not only 2 wheels, but also 4 open wheels and a wing. We're going to have AMA Supercross and the World of Outlaws up next here on The Madness with Stephen Ovens and the cast of the Turn 5 Racing Podcast. You're listening to Speed77 Radio and Race Chaser Online. We are your home for motorsports. We'll be right back.
For 17 years, Stock Car Steel has been a leading materials supplier to the racing industry. We're proud they're a motorsports content partner here at Race Chaser Online. The biggest names in NASCAR trust Stock Car Steel for raw materials such as carbon steel, chrome moly, DOM, aluminum, plastics, and much more. You can't build a race car without the basic materials, and Stock Car Steel is the place to get them. Don't forget to also visit Stock Car Steel's sister company, SRI Supplies, for racing and industry. SRI is the place to go for all your shop supply needs. Nuts, nuts, bolts, rivets, tapes, adhesives, cutting tools, chemicals, body shop supplies, paint shop supplies, lubricants, and more. A well-stocked race shop is a winning race shop, and the path to winning begins with 3 letters, SRI. For more information, visit stockcarsteel.com or SRI-supplies.com. Check them both out on Facebook or call them toll-free at 1-888-752-7272, 1-888-752-7272.
I'm Jacob Seelman.
And I'm Tom Baker.
You're listening to Speed 77 Radio,
Powered by Race Chaser Online.
We are your home for motorsports. Welcome back to Motorsports Madness here on Speed 77 Radio and RaceChaserOnline.com. Jacob Seelman, Tom Baker around the round table. And as we move into the dirt portion of our show this evening, want to welcome in Stephen Ovens and the guys from the Turn 5 Racing Podcast back with us to talk all the action from the Northeast, World of Outlaws sprint cars, and much, much more. If it's anything dirt, chances are these guys are going to know what's going on with it. Stephen, first off, welcome back to the show. Always glad to have you on. And you want to talk about a West Coast swing. The World of Outlaws STP Sprint Car Series is on a 2-month West Coast swing, and it all kicked off this weekend. Had 3 West Coast shows to start things off at the dirt track at Las Vegas and at Tucson International Raceway in Arizona.
Well, it sure did, and thank you boys for having us on tonight. Clint, I think we got an early indication here in these 3 West Coast races as to who we should be keeping our eyes out for. One obviously being Paul McMahon taking down the win the first night at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Donnie Schatz, who had a pretty good battle with Steve Kinzer, and we keep saying this Steve Kinzer guy's name. He's had a great run of it so far.
Yeah, and getting back to Paul McMahon, at Volusia, he was really strong. He was right on the cusp of winning. I think every night, I think he finished in the top 5, or maybe all but one. So, he was due for a win. Kinzer obviously being his last year. Obviously, he's not slowed down at all. I mean, he's challenging for wins. He did win at Volusia. He had strong showings out in Las Vegas. And Brad Sweet, KKR. All those groups of cars, 6, 7, 8 of them are going to be towards the front every week.
And you talk about Steve Kinzer, and how many times have we said the King's name over the last 30 years? And if there's anybody the King can handle being beat by, it's the guy he got beat by in Las Vegas, Donnie Schatz, who coincidentally now moves to within 4 victories of tying Mark Kinzer for 3rd all-time on the Outlaws win list. So Schatz, Kinzer, that whole Tony Stewart Racing team, really, really strong, and I'm not surprised to see them near the top of the pecking order again. I'm glad to see Kinzer back challenging every week, but we kept wondering who the first multiple winner of 2014 was going to be. No surprises, though, that it was that STP 15.
No, not at all. And Jacob, I know you're a stat guy, and I've got it. It was Schatz's 149th career win on the World of Outlaws.
Big number. And Mark Kinzer there in 3rd with 153. So Schatz is close. Everybody knows he's going to get it this year. That's a mark that we did not think would be touched in the modern era of the World of Outlaws, and all of a sudden, here comes Donnie Schatz, a 5-time champion of this series. Once he hits that magical 153 win mark and takes over sole possession of 3rd place, he's winning these races at clips of 15, 20 races a year in arguably the most competitive era the Outlaws have ever seen. Do we look at Donnie Schatz kind of like a Jimmy Johnson as one of the best drivers in Outlaw history because he's performing at the level he is in the most competitive era of the sport?
Yeah, we're both sitting here nodding our head. I really think you have to. I don't think there's any way that you can bring up some of the best that the World of Outlaws has ever seen. And I love the Jimmy Johnson comparison, and I'll tell you why. You look at what Steve Kinzer was able to do, and yes, the World of Outlaws were very competitive back then, But I think you have to look at what Donnie Schatz is doing right now against all that stiff competition and make a direct comparison to Jimmy Johnson. Yes, the eras were completely different when you compare Jimmy Johnson, Dale Earnhardt, and Richard Petty. But if you look at how Jimmy's doing it and how Donnie Schatz is doing it against that competition, I think it's almost it's a mirror image of each other. What do you think, Clint?
Oh, I agree 100%. I mean, you're talking about a guy who won basically a third of the races last year. Granted, it's 96 races, so that means he was in victory lane 20 plus times. And you sit and you look, and now you look at the super teams, Casey Kane Racing, Sammy Swindell. Granted, he doesn't have Delansky to fall back on this year, as a help if he helped him at all.
Actually, they just said Craig Delansky is going back to the big game tree stands ride. Of course, that won't be on a full time. I think they're going to do a little bit of traveling from what I had heard. I don't know about you, Jacob, but I know he's back with the big game tree stands car, and we'll see what their schedule holds.
Yeah, he is. Delansky back with the Big Game 7 team, but they're not going to run a full-time tour with the Outlaws this year. They're going to focus primarily on Knoxville Raceway and the series that Knoxville has struck with MAV TV for 2014, and they're going to run a lot of the Eldora Speedway races for this year. They've said they're going to do some traveling shows, which I'm sure does mean some shows with the Outlaws in 2014. I'm sure you'll see them at the Knoxville Nationals, the Four Crown Nationals, some of the big money shows, but I don't think you'll see Delansky at a lot of these smaller races. The Canadian Swing, the Northwest Swing comes to mind. Their focus is primarily on the Midwest for this year, and for Craig Delansky, it's I'm sure a welcome change because his son is coming up through the racing ranks as well, and I know Delansky really looking to help his young son get started in the sprint car world as well for 2014 and beyond. So a different change for that 7 team this year, not traveling the country for the Outlaws Championship, but I know from what I've heard from Craig Delansky over the last couple of days since the announcement, they're happy with the decision and they're looking forward to this year.
Yeah, and he will be fun to watch. I know I paid close attention to Craig when he had Mike Woodring as his crew chief. And Mike Woodring up here in the Northeast is a 360 sprint legend, 8 or 9 time Empire Super Sprint champion up here in the Northeast. So we always enjoyed watching Craig Delansky. And you were talking about young drivers, and one guy that we both talked about here before we came on that we wanted to bring up was this Rico Abreu, taking home 2 wins at the Cocopah Speedway with the ASCS National Tour. He really turned some heads and raised some eyebrows this past weekend.
And
yeah, I mean, Rico's proved a lot here in the last couple of races specifically. He was good in 2013, but didn't always light the world on fire. Clint, he's really come into his own and a run of success here to start the 2014 season, though.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I was just getting ready to say that in Las Vegas, he went from like 24th to 7th or something like that, or 17th to 7th. He got the Hard Charger Award. The next night he was running good and he had mechanical problems. So, you take a guy who's had so much success with the midgets and now he's doing the ASCS and he's in the wing car, and I think it just goes to show you how much talent he's got. And he's not going to follow the whole World of Outlaw Tour, but I know he's going to hit a lot of races and a lot of the ASCS with the wing stuff.
Yeah, he's going to hit more than 100 shows between wing sprint cars, non-wing sprint cars, midgets, you name it. He's got a very aggressive schedule this year. I know they were saying the other day if he's not at a racetrack racing, he's probably going to be traveling the night before or the night after from going to a race. So he's going to be a very, very busy guy this year.
Yeah, and I think as Tom and I mentioned after we heard that Rico won those ASCS national shows, big wins come in small packages.
Yes, they sure do. And on that note, I think I'll take the opportunity to shift gears here into the last thing that we wanted to talk about tonight, and that was some big news for the Northeastern folks up here. At the Motorsports Expo show that was held at the New York State Fairgrounds in Syracuse, New York, this past weekend, Saturday and Sunday. And that news was that the Rolling Wheels Raceway is now going to be known as the Rolling Wheels Raceway Park, is going to be opening up on a semi-regular basis every other Sunday night. We have talked in the past with Tom about the fact that we were hoping that the Weedsport Speedway would open up on a regular basis on Sunday nights. Looks like they're going to be specials only for 2014. Dates that we're pretty sure of will be sometime over the summer with the Super Dirt Car Big Block Modified Series. And then, of course, they're special during Super Dirt Week. But this Rolling Wheels announcement was pretty big. We don't have all of the details yet, but there was enough details as far as a schedule. And let me tell you, Jacob, there's some big money being put up for these shows for the first year with this new ownership group. Again, we're waiting for more details from Dirt Car about all of the specifics and things of that nature. But to hear that Rolling Wheels is coming out on a semi-regular basis is great news for dirt fans up here in the Northeast. And Clint, it's really, we were just talking, this is really going to make some teams that make some pretty tough decisions as far as, are they going to want to look at this Rolling Wheels schedule with these top dollar shows, one in particular being a $30,000 to win dirt big block modified show. And on that same night,
wow.
Yeah, and on that same night, there'll be a $20,000 to win 360 sprint car show. And on top of that, there will be a $10,000 to win sportsman modified show.
That's a lot of dollars.
Yeah, that's a lot of dollars. And boy, I would imagine that was enough to get plenty of buzz going around the old Gator Racing News Motorsports Expo over the weekend for sure.
It certainly was, and the thing that we were talking about is some of these teams having to make tough decisions. Is we did a little research, and one of the tracks up here in the Northeast, the Utica Rome Speedway, which was made famous by none other than Richie Evans in the 61, that track, Utica Rome, is going to be flying under the NASCAR home track banner this year. And that was to entice some drivers to run modifieds out there this year on Sunday nights. And the program that they have put a program together at Utica Rome that doesn't interfere with the Super Dirt Car Big Block Modified Series, doesn't interfere with the Race of Champions Modified Series. So potentially, if somebody wins the track championship at Utica Rome, wins the NASCAR New York State title, wins the American Racer Cup and bonus, wins the Super Dirt Car Series title and the Race of Champions Series title, they could take home over $90,000 for a season's worth of work.
And yet again, I say that is a lot of zeros, and certainly for some of these Northeast guys, it's going to make it worth their while to come and run a lot of these races, because we all know this racing deal in this day and age ain't cheap.
It's not cheap, guys, and I'll tell you what, a track like this at Rolling Wheels, a situation like this, kind of becomes a game changer if it's all as it appears. And I think that's what a lot of people are going to be waiting to see is, okay, you know, you kind of seem to come out of thin air with this here, and you've got schedules, but there's not much more information out there. And I noticed that though Dirt Car did confirm that there was a real estate transaction going on, there's been a little more said out of the official offices here. I've been doing a little research online during the show here, and seeing a column by Doug Elkins, and you know, it doesn't really say too much more than you said, but boy, that's certainly a stunner. And between that and Utica Rome going NASCAR, the landscape's a little different on Sunday nights up there in the dirt car series for sure.
Not the first time Utica Rome's gone NASCAR either. They're actually coming back to the home track's fold, and that's really good to see. You know, Richie Evans' home track, obviously we know the kind of NASCAR and modified history that track has. I'm personally thrilled for Northeast Racing that Utica Rome's back under the NASCAR banner, and I think it's going to make the New York title race for this year very, very, very interesting.
I don't know what to think of that. I mean, Fulton and Utica Rome were NASCAR for a while back in the it was late 80s, early 90s, sometime in that time frame there. And I think if you have more than one, it's good, but I'm not sure. It'll be interesting to see how it works out because really, in terms of dirt tracks, I think Utica Rome is going to be the only NASCAR dirt track. So the drivers that run there really don't have the other NASCAR sanctioned dirt tracks to go run. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out for them. But definitely, you would think a move to position themselves as something unique, and from a marketing standpoint, to be under the NASCAR banner. I know just for the teams that race there to be able to go out and look for sponsors and be able to show that NASCAR statistical info in their marketing proposals is a big deal. I mean, everybody recognizes the NASCAR logo, so. I think it's going to be a good thing. It's just going to be an interesting thing and a different thing. I'm sure we'll have more about that in the coming days and weeks.
And let us throw out two names that have already confirmed to be running for the Utica Rome title this year. Stuart Friesen and Matt Shepard.
Should we pretend to be surprised?
Wow. Well, there you go. That's very interesting, and I know, Stephen, you and I talked about this a little earlier, and you were saying that you may have heard something about them hoping that guys would run Spencer Speedway on Friday night, Chemung Speedway on Saturday, and Utica Rome on Sunday. You got two pavement tracks and the dirt track there, so not sure what the commonality is, but I can tell you that it certainly could start some interesting speculation about whether Utica Rome might entertain the notion at some point down the road of if the Sunday night dirt wars up there get a little too crowded of going back to asphalt. That certainly would be an interesting discussion to have. But I think it'll be good. It certainly differentiates them, and you'll get some specialists that'll run there because of it, I'm sure, like Matt, and those guys. So be interesting.
Now, guys, what about take this into consideration, too. You've got two of the biggest names in dirt racing in Stuart Friesen and Matt Shepard already committed to Utica Rome. Now you got Rolling Wheels coming out with this schedule that's pumping out dollar after dollar. And I know that sometimes they don't draw from the same area, but you're taking two of the best that aren't going to be running there. So that's going to leave Rolling Wheels open to maybe somebody else to, not dominate, but maybe a different winner and having a chance to win all that money. And then the second thing I want to mention about Rolling Wheels is they're going to run sprint cars every other week, the 360s. Again, Steven and I were talking, I don't know where they're going to, or where or how or whatever that they're going to draw their 360s from, with the touring going on and the different races that they run, but he's planning on running a full series with those guys too.
I wasn't aware that he was going to run a full series of 360s, and I find that to be very curious because you make a good point, Clint. Really, 360 racing up there is limited to two very, very good touring series, both the Patriot Sprint Tour and, of course, the Lucas Oil Empire Super Sprint Series. Both of those series, really good series, and he's gonna have to grow the field from scratch, and that's going to be a tall order there because I think he's going to, unless he picks a whole boatload of money, he's going to have a hard time getting people not to run the series races. So that kind of muddies the sprint car waters. You'd have thought maybe he would have gone with a 305 type deal. But it'll be interesting to see how that works out for him for sure.
Yeah, it will be. And before we wrap up the dirt side of things tonight, Steven and Clint, I do want to take a look real quick because the Outlaws are going to be back in action on the West Coast again this weekend at the Tulare, California Thunderbolt Raceway for the continuation of their 2014 season. We've talked about some guy named the King a few times. He won the inaugural race at Tulare back in 2003. Tim Kading, though, TK's won 2 of the last 3 features at Tulare and has really prided himself in his runs when the series comes to California. So Kading going to be back in that Roth Motorsports 83. Craig Delansky, who won the second feature last year, not going to be at Tulare that I know of. You got guys like Joey Saldana, who's a 4-time winner at Tulare, most wins ever at that racetrack. What do you guys see going on this weekend for the 2 shows at Tulare as we continue the West Coast swing? Do we see one of these guys who have already won this season keep the trend going, or do we see a new winner break out?
Well, I think that wherever you go, Schatz is going to be the top name on the list, and very well he should be. Tim Kading definitely would put him up there as one of the favorites. He's had a great start to this year. He's been fast every time he's been on the track. Like you said, he's a previous winner there. I look for him, and I look for Darren Pittman to rebound. And
I really think Pittman at some point has got to kind of get things rolling, and I think this could be an opportunity for him to kind of break out for his 2014 season. And you talked about Joey Saldana. He's going to have a little bit of tough sledding with the broken arm that he got here a couple nights ago. So, we'll see how Joey holds up for that. I haven't heard any word that he's not going to be in the car, but we'll see what's going to happen.
Well, he raced at Tucson.
Yeah,
and they didn't think that he was, but like he said, he wasn't sure how they could tell it was broken with all the pins and needles that he's already got in there from Eldora. So
it's going to be interesting to see if Saldana could come back after the arm injury and score a 5th win at Tulare. I would say let's bow to the greatness for the weekend because, we've seen Joey Saldana come back from a couple of really scary accidents to still be competitive on the Outlaws Tour. So I wouldn't put anything past him. And, he's still looking for that first win with the Modern Motorsports team. So Saldana's got to be one to watch. And, the curious case of Darren Pittman, I keep waiting for him to break out and make something happen, get that first win, and he keeps just being kind of normal, almost mediocre to start this season.
Yeah, it's kind of been surprising to me because I really felt like Darren had a lot of swagger to him with pulling down that championship, coming down to the last night, and I've just really been kind of surprised with, let's call a spade, a little bit of a lackluster start to the season. And Sammy Swindell, let's not leave Sammy out either.
Nah, you can never leave Sammy out, the second winningest outlaw in history. So we'll keep an eye on all the dirt stuff as we go through the course of the next couple of days leading up to this weekend's action in Tulare for the World of Outlaws STP Sprint Cars. Steven, Clint, appreciate you guys coming on as always for another edition of Motorsports Madness. Always love talking the dirt track stuff with you. And we're going to conclude the dirt segment, Tom, you and I here real quick with a look before we go to commercial at some two-wheel dirt action from, what else? The World Center of Racing again. Daytona Supercross back in action. And who else?
Ryan Villapoto.
Who else but Red Plate RV1? Villapoto goes to victory lane for the 4th time in his career and the 4th in the last 5 races at Daytona. Extends his points lead to 28 now. More than a full race. We had questions after the first 5 or 6 races. Was this a year where Villapoto could be vulnerable, could be challenged for a championship? No.
Well, let's not get too carried away just yet. But he's off to a strong start, and more uniquely, I think, when you talk about this race, is that he is now just one win shy of Ricky Carmichael's 5 Daytona wins. And I think when Ricky got that 5th win, we all pretty much had anointed him as the Steve Kinzer of two wheels. Nobody will ever catch his number of wins, or Richard Petty of two wheels, maybe a better analogy. Nobody will ever catch that. Nobody will ever do that at Daytona. Well, we're 1 win short now, and I definitely think that Ryan Villopoto is around long enough to do it, and he certainly still has a good shot at it. But yeah, he's off to a strong start, and he's got a 28-point lead now in the Monster Energy standings heading into next week's event at Ford Field in Detroit. It certainly was. I think it sends a message to the rest of the competition that if you're going to win the championship, you're going through me.
Of course it does. The win was Villopoto's 37th career 450 Supercross main event victory. That is good for 5th on the all-time list, and he is now within a couple of catching Chad Reed, who right now has 44. Villopoto's coming for 4th, and with Reed out for the foreseeable future, recovering from some of the injuries he suffered earlier on in the Supercross season, Villopoto's on the march, and you're right, the road to the Supercross title goes through RV1. It's going to be wild to see how the rest of this turns out, and Villopoto just continues to climb up the list. He's about to cross Reed for 4th on the all-time AMA motorcycle win list, period. When you combine 250 and 450 wins, Villopoto actually tied with Chad Reed with the win at Daytona. 48 career AMA victories. The next one will put him into sole possession of 4th all-time, and what do you know? The next guy on that list, Tom, you mentioned him already, Ricky Carmichael at 59. So Villopoto continues to write history, and just kind of like with Jimmy Johnson, we're just servants in the Ryan Villopoto era of motorcycle racing.
Well, yeah, I mean, Villopoto is still in his. Now we don't even know if he's reached his peak at this point. I mean, it's not as if he can't be around for a number of years yet, and I just think that it's going to be fascinating to just see how long he can stay on top. This two-wheel stuff ain't easy, and he certainly has managed to make it look easy for a number of seasons now, and continues to do that. So not a huge surprise, I don't think, that he got the win at Daytona, but certainly something to behold, because as you say, he just continues to write history in this thing, and we just get the pleasure of being able to sit back and watch it happen.
Yeah, we do. And, I was disappointed by the runs for the Florida natives. Mike Alessi went down on the opening lap after getting the whole shot, rebounded only to 14th. Justin Barcia, another one of the Florida native. We've hailed Barcia now in his 2nd season as one of the real standouts of Supercross, but he's been lackluster this season. Finished 12th at Daytona. You had guys like James Stewart who had problems in the race. You had guys... Again, we talked about Chad Reed, who's still out. Ken Roxon finished runner-up to Villopoto, but he was way, way back. And then you've got, some of the others. Ryan Dungey, who finished 3rd, but was never a factor. It's just, again, Daytona takes the men and separates them from the boys. And Ryan Villopoto, the last 5 years, has been the king of Daytona and working on being the king of Supercross. If he wins 4 straight, I would start getting your references to Ricky Carmichael ready to go, because there's no stopping him. Even with these guys like Barcia, Roxon, Dungey, Reed, there's no touching RV1, and we'll see what happens. The next race on the Supercross schedule going to be another East Region race. And, we're getting closer. Just 7 races to go now in the season. They head to Ford Field in Detroit this weekend for race 11 of the Supercross season. Race 5 now of the East Region schedule, and all roads lead to Vegas. So Supercross getting ready to wind down, but the rest of the season just heating up, Tom. And with that, we conclude our dirt segment, but we're not done because, I don't know, there's still some wine and cheese on the table for Joel coming up here too.
Well, and before we tie this up with a bow, let's just get out there that the ASCS Carolina Sprint Car Series, which happens to be by the same family who does this radio show, me, and Team Full Throttle Companies. And, of course, very excited to announce that Harris Speedway has booked us for shows in the 2014 season. The first will be in July, and the second one in October. The second one is a 2-day show as part of their Monster Mash weekend there. That's October 17th and 18th. July the 19th is the first show. And the second show, the 2-day show on the 18th, will be at least 1,000 to win, minimum 1,000 to win. It may be higher than that before we're done. Planning some interesting things for that Monster Mash 2-day show for the 305 ASCS Carolina Sprint Cars at Harris Speedway in Rutherfordton, North Carolina. So thank you to Scott Childress and the folks from Harris Speedway for giving us an opportunity to come and run there a couple of times, and we expect to have hopefully at least one more major announcement this week as well about an addition to the schedule that could be even bigger than the Harris show. Keep our fingers crossed. Not done yet, but we're hoping to get it there. So lots of stuff going on in the South with sprint car racing, 305 style, building itself up for the future, and future definitely looks bright, and I couldn't be more humble, and I know that all of the guys that are ready to go racing with us are pretty excited as well. So definitely a good weekend for us in that particular series.
And the dirt world just keeps expanding. And, you know, you mentioned big things on the horizon. Isn't that how we always do things around here? The bigger, the better.
Well, that's right. That's what we try to do. And, look, you and I and the rest of the staff here, we're just very passionate about what we do, and we try to do it as well as we can. It's all about coming at it from the fan standpoint, and no matter what the enterprise is, we try and make it as special as we can. So I'm just, by the grace of God we go, and really excited about what is ahead for the ASCS Carolina Sprint Series, the newest addition to the family here. And so we'll start off on April the 25th at Oglethorpe Speedway in Georgia, and go from there.
Yeah, we will. And, you know, I'm seeing that plate that we've left out for Joel, and I'm smelling it, and I'm smelling our final caution flag of the night, and I'm smelling some open wheel action when we come back. Joel joins us at the round table to talk F1 and IndyCar, including a very, very big addition to this year's Indy 500 field. That's next after these words on Speed77 Radio and Race Chaser Online. We are your home for motorsports.
With our patented Hex-Tech grips, Cobalt tools are tough to put down.
Try it now.
What are you doing up there, Jimmy? Welding, Chad? Get in the car. Pipe wrench. Hey, Jimmy.
Cobalt tools, tough to put down. Available exclusively at Lowe's.
If I had a nickel.
If I had a nickel?
If I had a nickel for every time I wish my car had a horn. If I had a nickel for every time.
For every lucky charm I have brought to the racetrack.
If I had a nickel
For every wardrobe change I had to make.
Man, if I had a nickel.
If I had a nickel for every time I coulda, woulda, shoulda.
If you had a Sunoco Rewards credit card, you'd get a nickel for every gallon you pump. Go Sunoco.
I'm Jacob Seelman.
And I'm Tom Baker.
You're listening to Speed77 Radio,
powered by Race Chaser Online.
We are your home for motorsports. Welcome back to Motorsports Madness here on Speed77 Radio and RaceChaserOnline.com, and it's time once again to delve into Open Wheel Central. Our resident wine and cheeser and open wheel expert is back here at the round table, Joel Sebastianelli. Joel, first off, I know this is a big weekend as far as the open wheel side of things, and I know you're really excited to kick off the 2014 season. Formula One opening with the Australian Grand Prix this weekend down in Melbourne. Certainly a lot of unknowns going into this new season with the new rules package, the new cars, the new engine package. It's going to be a lot of questions being answered going into this weekend's race, but a lot of things that we may not know until the checkered flag falls. Talk a little bit about this weekend's race and what you expect to see happen once cars take to the track in Australia.
Well, I think especially not just for this race, but for the first half of the F1 season this year, the thing to expect is the unexpected. There are a lot of unknowns. The key word here is reliability. And throughout testing, we've seen a huge gap between Mercedes and everybody else. Of course, Mercedes-AMG Petronas has to be the favorite heading into this year, given that they are the factory team and that Mercedes, the manufacturer itself, has just performed so strong. There's a huge divide between them and Renault, and even a pretty substantial divide between them and Ferrari as well. So if you're powered by Mercedes, you've got to be confident, but not overly confident, because even for those teams, we've just seen so many issues all throughout testing, both in Spain and in Bahrain. So you have to expect the unexpected, although I think as the season evens out, teams are going to be figuring this out. The manufacturers will sort out, and things will at least develop some sort of a status quo. But right now, there are a lot of unknowns for everybody between fans, drivers, and even these teams themselves. Nobody really knows exactly what to expect heading into this weekend in Melbourne.
You talk about Renault being behind the 8 ball going into this weekend's Australian Grand Prix. We've seen Sebastian Vettel be so good in this race over the past couple of years, but with all the unknowns, with Renault being in trouble, I guess you'd almost have to put it now, with their engine package, what do you see Vettel's chances being of being competitive as far as for the podium or for the win this weekend in Australia?
I don't see it. I don't see it at all. This has to be almost like another test for Renault because they've had so little time on the track. Just to put it in perspective, when you look at the testing numbers and the overall kilometers accrued by engine manufacturers throughout the 3 tests, Mercedes logged nearly 18,000 kilometers. Renault as a whole didn't even get to 9,000. They have less than half of what Mercedes has put up, and they're still well behind Ferrari, who got almost up to 11,000, I believe, for kilometers. So certainly Mercedes is far ahead. Sebastian Vettel, just by nature of the fact that he's Sebastian Vettel, if the car can survive, he's going to compete in races this year. But I don't think that, despite winning 4 straight world championships, I don't think he's the favorite heading into this year, and I really don't see any way that unless Renault really surprises us the way Ferrari did in 2012 with a car that was not so good in testing, but really ended up surprising and actually won the 2nd race of the year. Unless something like that happens, I don't see Vettel really being a contender early on at all, even though he won this race back in 2011.
Looking at some of the past results for the Australian Grand Prix, we've seen some parity in this race over the last couple of years. Based on track history, if you had to pick a driver that you think is going to be a contender based on what we've seen over the last couple of years and based on testing, who would you say to keep an eye on going into this weekend?
I'll go ahead and pick 2 guys, both with Mercedes power. The first guy I'll pick is Jenson Button. Jenson has won this race 3 times in his career, 2009, 2010, and 2012. And even though McLaren isn't necessarily the favorite, they still have McLaren power. They've been very impressive in testing. And I think Jenson Button's somebody who could certainly find his way up at the front of the pack as that race goes on. And the other one, and the guy I'll pick to win the race actually, is Lewis Hamilton. Now, he won this race in 2008 with McLaren. But now with Mercedes, he might actually be the consensus favorite for the World Drivers' Championship, in addition to his team being likely being up there in the Constructors' Chase as well. Lewis Hamilton's always very good at this course, and assuming that their cars can survive, I expect you'll see those 2 up near the front all day long and up on the podium when all is said and done.
It's going to be interesting to see as the Australian Grand Prix kicks off this weekend. The V8 Supercar is going to be the undercard race to the Formula One race that takes place on Sunday. But Joel, a lot more open wheel news to talk about as well from the IndyCar side of things, and big changes being announced at the tail end of last week for the Indy 500 qualifying for 2014. Some sweeping changes that are really going to change how we see this grid set. The 33 drivers who will start the race actually going to be set on Saturday, with the exact positions not even being filled until Sunday, which traditionally has been bump day. Looking at this new format, what's your opinion of the changes that IndyCar's announced for 2014, and how do you see it changing how the grid plays out for this year's 500?
IndyCar fans, perhaps more than any others, tend to be traditionalists. They don't like change. And this news actually met with a little bit of resistance from fans. But from my perspective, I think not only does it make sense, I think it's going to be really exciting as it plays out. The way it stands right now is Saturday, the field will be set for the Indy 500. The fastest 33 cars are going to compose the starting field. We'll know who those are, and they'll be guaranteed an entry and at least one more attempt to qualify a 4-lap time. And the fastest 9 will be locked in that day and advance to the Fast 9 shootout. When you move to Sunday, all of the times from Saturday are completely erased, and positions 10 through 33 need to qualify and compete in another 4-lap attempt to determine their starting position. And then you've got the Fast 9 shootout to end the day live on NBC Sunday afternoon at 2. If you're having it on Saturday, you're competing up against the Preakness. You've got other sporting events that are going on. That format didn't really work. I think on Sunday, it's actually an off weekend for NASCAR. So as far as racing goes, you've got nothing conflicting at that time. It just makes a lot of sense for IndyCar to do, especially when, for Bump Day, we have this sort of nostalgia. But Bump Day recently hasn't been much of a bump day. We only had 33 cars compete, and Jonah Lacey, disgracefully in the Lotus, still managed to qualify 33rd for a time that wouldn't have even put him in the field 20 years ago, because there was just nobody else to compete against him for that 33rd spot. You had only 34 compete last year, and it's looking like there wouldn't be many more than that this year either. So if you're not going to have a bump day like the days of old, where you've got 15 cars competing for that 33rd spot, then I see no reason why this wouldn't be the way to go. This is going to create the most drama, and it makes the most sense for IndyCar. A very smart decision to still maintain the integrity of the weekend, but make some changes that are definitely going to be beneficial for the series.
Now, talking about the Indy 500, and you even brought up NASCAR, so let's tie the two together in the form of an announcement that came out of the Andretti Autosports stable last week, in the fact that the double will return for 2014, and Kurt Busch has been formally announced to be driving a 5th Andretti Autosport car for this year's Indianapolis 500. Busch gonna try to complete the double and race in both the Indy 500 and the Coke 600 on Memorial Day Sunday. Joel, first for Kurt Busch, it's a big opportunity in potentially race-winning equipment. We know how good the Andretti team is at Indianapolis, and this is an announcement we've been waiting on for quite a while. What do you see Kurt Busch's prospects are of the 500? I know a lot of people are saying he's going to be competitive, but from an insider's standpoint, where do you think he stacks up among the rest of the field?
Well, first of all, I want to commend Kurt Busch for taking the opportunity to do this and, actually actively pursuing it. He completed his rookie orientation and just some tests last year with Andretti Autosport. And now coming this year, I think it's great exposure for the IndyCar series too, because you'll have those crossover fans who are going to watch. Let's not forget, ratings have been suffering at the Indy 500 the last few years, so it's definitely a big jolt for the series that hasn't seen anyone try the double since Robbie Gordon in 2004. I think that Kurt Busch is in competitive equipment, but I don't really take him seriously for the race win, simply because he doesn't have a really strong open wheel pedigree. The name that keeps coming up is A.J. Allmendinger, and how A.J. was so strong, led some laps last year, but he was also a champ car World Series stud when he was younger. Really belongs in open wheel, if you ask me, whereas guys like Kurt Busch have been in NASCAR for their entire career. So I don't see him just jumping in to the Indy 500, even in great equipment, and finishing in the top 5 or the top 10. I think there's definitely going to be some challenges, and I don't know how the NASCAR schedule will affect him in practice, but if he doesn't have a lot of practice time either, then it's just tough for me to envision him really being a serious contender for the win. But I'm very curious to see how he will do. I think he will perform respectably. This guy's a true racer. Hats off to him for doing it, and I'd love to see more Sprint Cup guys and more guys just from other series in general that don't have conflicts that day at that time of the race when the green flag drops. Let's see them come. Let's see Kyle Larson, who asked Chip Ganassi for a chance to race in the Indy 500 at one point one day. Let's see him come over. Let's see some of these other guys from other series try their hand at this. It's just great exposure for everyone, and it really puts the Indy 500 back on the map as a place where not only the best IndyCar drivers compete, but where the best drivers in the world, period, compete. Kurt Busch is a great addition, and I really welcome him into the field, as most IndyCar fans should.
And not to be forgotten, Kurt's brother Kyle said after Kurt made the announcement last week that he would like to try his hand at the double someday down the road, although he'd like to have a cup title under his belt before he pursues it actively. Joel, with the qualifying changes, it is going to make it a little interesting on Kurt Busch because that Saturday, Kurt would have to make a qualifying attempt for the 500 and then manage to get back to Charlotte for the NASCAR Sprint All-Star race that night if he's eligible before returning to Indianapolis on Sunday for the chance to set his qualifying position should he be among the fastest 33. What kind of a strain is that going to put on Kurt as he attempts to become the first driver since Robbie Gordon in 2004, but since his boss Tony Stewart did it in 2001 to try and complete all 1,100 miles of racing on Memorial Day Sunday?
I am not saying this as a guarantee. I don't know how it will be handled, or even if the rules are the same actually. But if you look back at the 2011 Indy 500, you had two Andretti Autosport machines fail to qualify. One of them was Mike Conway, and one of them was Ryan Hunter-Ray. Now, I believe Conway was actually higher in points at the time, but there was a lot more money at stake for Ryan Hunter-Ray. And on the Monday after qualifying, there was an agreement that Andretti struck with AJ Foyt Enterprises to put Ryan Hunter-Ray in the 41 machine to replace Bruno Junqueira. Because at the time, per the race rules, the car, which I'm not exactly sure where it qualified at the time, it was just moved to the end of the field. Essentially, the car qualifies and not the driver. Now, whether they've changed that or not, I'm actually not sure. That's a really good question, and it's something that I'll look into. But I would think that if Kurt Busch does indeed have some sort of a conflict that day, it may not be necessary for him to do the double. They may be able to qualify that car with somebody else and then fit Kurt Busch in the car come race day. But even if it's only for qualifying, I think Kurt Busch really needs all the time that he can get at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The thing you can't underestimate is how physically taxing racing in an open-wheel car is. It takes a different sort of physical fitness. I won't necessarily say much more, but it's a different sort of physical fitness from racing in a stock car. So he needs to be well conditioned for that. Even if Indianapolis, I think sometimes there's more of a mental strain on these guys because it's the holy grail of open-wheel racing. It's not the most difficult oval, actually, I would argue. But from a mental standpoint, you've got that stress, and you've got the physical stress that's going to be put on him. He needs as much time in the seat as he can manage to get.
And it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I think I'm just as excited as you and as all the IndyCar fans are to see the double back, to see Kurt Busch have a shot to qualify for this year's 500. And we'll see how that plays out in May, just like we'll see how the Australian Grand Prix plays out this weekend. And I know you'll be back on here a week from tonight to break down everything that happens from Melbourne. Joel, as always, we appreciate you coming on the show and look forward to hearing from you after this weekend's season opener for the F1 World Championship.
It's the most wonderful time of the year. So glad it's back.
All right, Tom. So, in talks about the Indy 500, Joel said Kurt Busch is in competitive equipment, but he doesn't take him seriously for the race win because of his pedigree. You know, names like AJ Allmendinger get dropped. We forget that AJ had champ car experience. I think some people often overlook that. But with Kurt Busch in this, the double being back for 2014, 1,100 miles in one day, where do you look at Kurt Busch in this whole process as being for the Indianapolis 500? We know he's a threat at Charlotte. He's a former winner of the Coke 600. But this is going to be his first shot at what I would call the big dance, per se, on Memorial Day Sunday, the Indy 500. His boss, Tony Stewart, did it. Kurt wants to try the same thing now. He's in a good car. Where do you see Kurt stacking up before it's all said and done?
Well, I don't see him contending for a win. I mean, you would have to think that is extremely far-fetched. I think what I said in my blog last week was I think a finish for him is a win. If he can finish the race and get through it without any issues, I think that's considered a win. And if he is able to get back and get into the car at Charlotte and go finish the 600 miles and be in contention, I think that is going to be an extraordinary day for Kurt Busch. And I just think that this whole idea is a very sound one. And I think it's, I know Kurt said that it may be a one and done kind of thing, but you know what? I'd like to see more of this. I just think it's great for Indy because Indy needs something of a boost to appeal once again to the fans that kind of went away from them when it got to be more road racing than oval racing, and a lot of the AJ Foyts and Mario Andretti's and Gordon Johncock's that grew up on the short tracks of America stopped being able to compete because it became more about road racing skills and a lot of money than about talent. I think IndyCar needs that ratings boost that will come from having a guy from NASCAR go over there and compete. And I think there are some guys, Kurt Busch, besides Kurt Busch, I should say, AJ Allmendinger certainly would fit the bill and did it last year. Of course, he didn't try the double, but I think, certainly Danica Patrick has, the marketing appeal of doing it, and she's run up front at Indy and led Indy before, and, you've got
one Indy in a rookie year.
Sure, yeah, and you've got some others. Kyle Larson, I think it would be very interesting to see what Kyle could do at some point down the road in an Indianapolis-style car, somebody who came out of the open-wheel scene. I mean, I think it's good all the way around. It'll be interesting for NASCAR. It'll be interesting for Indy. This is a neat deal, but I think we should temper our expectations a little bit as far as performance. I think Kurt making the race and Kurt finishing the race would have to be considered a win. Anything above that is just extraordinary because all of these cars now are so specialized, and so I think this is as much of a I don't want to call it a gimmick by any means. It's not that, and it's not designed to be that, but I guess what I'm saying is, from the standpoint of being a fan, I think it should just be enough for us to sit back and enjoy the fact that we get to see someone trying to do this, which is really an Olympic-style feat in terms of both the the physical toll it takes on you and the mental toll as well to run those two races in the same day and have to travel and do all of that in between. I mean, it's definitely got to be very difficult on the body. So, I think we need as fans just to wish for more of this, just purely to see it happen and enjoy it, rather than necessarily trying to judge whether it was successful or not just by the result that it gets. I think it's neat what Kurt's doing, and I'm to see how he does over the course of the month of May at Indy and how he grows from the beginning to the end.
And oh, by the way, just a little tidbit here. With the new qualifying format for the 500, Kurt will have to run on Saturday and Sunday. He'll have to be among the top 33 to make the race, and then he'll have to re-qualify for his actual starting position on Sunday in a departure from the traditional pole day, bump day format. The All-Star race, which Kurt coincidentally is not yet qualified for, runs on Saturday night following IndyCar qualifying, Where that throws a wrench in the works slightly, and in a way is going to be interesting, is if Kurt races his way in through the Sprint Showdown or wins a race between now and the All-Star race, does he qualify on Saturday and pray that his time is good enough to get in and leave before qualifying is officially over to make it back for the All-Star race, or does he stick it out to the end in Indy? It's a lot of questions yet to be answered, but it's going to be fun to watch. You know, anytime you put a Busch brother behind the wheel of anything, whether it's a soapbox or a Sprint Cup car or an Indy car, you know they're going to go fast, and you know they're going to be in contention somehow.
Well, as of right now, I'm not sure there are too many more than 33 cars entered. So I think we will need to, some of that would be judged by the size of the entry list and where Kurt's speed fits in. The All-Star race is a great race, but he's not qualified for it right now. And, I'm sure he'd like to be able to do that if he can get back in time and he gets qualified. I'm sure he'd like to run it. But I think given the choice between the two, particularly if you're not qualified, there's no way he would be able to get back in time to run the Open, I don't think. So I think it's one of those situations where I would say that you'd probably concentrate on Indy that weekend unless there was a clear shot to get back and you were already qualified for the All-Star race to get back and run that. Just focus on the IndyCar.
I would tend to agree, but remember, the showdown this year is on Friday night after the Camping World Truck Series.
That's true. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that change. Yeah, so that all kind of worked out really well, didn't it? In theory, at least. The only thing he has to worry about is if he is the All-Star race, he just has to worry about timing in well enough to be able to get back in time to run it, or trying to. It takes what time it takes to get from Indianapolis to Charlotte. In a helicopter or a private jet or whatever. But I'm sure he'll hire a very fast pilot.
I was gonna say that's what they make jet fuel for, isn't it?
Yeah, so you get Chuck Yeager out of retirement and go with it. It'll certainly be interesting to see how that plays out for him. But I'm just glad he's doing it. It's a novelty, and yet it's a serious effort. And I'm happy that Andretti Autosport has given him the chance, and that TSR is or SHR, I should say, is supporting it. Because it really is going to be fun to finally, it's been a while. The only other two drivers who've successfully done it, I believe, are Tony and John Andretti. Am I right?
Robbie Gordon had tried it a couple times. I think he completed the double once, actually made it to Charlotte and raced. I want to say that was in 2003, because his 2001 and 2004 attempts, I believe, were thwarted by rain. But Robbie Gordon, I remember, did pull it off once. Can't remember exactly which year in the early 2000s it was, but it was the year
I forgot about him.
It was the year he almost won the 500, and my stat boy brain is good, but it's not brilliant, and I'm fudging a little bit on the year, but I'm pretty sure it was 2003, the year that Robbie ran out of fuel coming to the white flag in Indianapolis. So, it'll be interesting to see, but before we go off air, as we always do, got to make picks for this weekend, and we're headed to Bristol, and whenever you go to Bristol, we know anything can happen, and when you go to Bristol, a couple names come to mind too. So before we ride off into the twilight here this evening, who do you like for the Nationwide and the Sprint Cup races this weekend in Thunder Valley?
Well, Bristol's going to be very interesting on the Nationwide side because I think it's a great equalizer. I don't necessarily know that the Cup guys are going to be totally dominant there. I could easily see somebody like a Chase Elliott or a Kyle Larson or someone of that type sneaking up through. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and just call a big upset here and predict Chase Elliott ends up in victory lane at Bristol on the Nationwide side, just because it's fun to go out on a limb again. And I think Chase certainly has the equipment, and I think that at a track like Bristol, he has all of the talent and skill necessary to pull it off, so I'm going to pick Chase. And over on the Sprint Cup side, you know what? I really think that a driver you're going to have to pay an awful lot of attention to at Bristol this coming weekend is Jeff Gordon. And I think that I'm going to go ahead and take a flyer with the 24 car this weekend at Bristol.
It's been a long time since Jeff Gordon's won a short track race, though. 2006 at Martinsville.
Now, I'm going to tell you, I think it's going to be, I really feel like it's either going to be him or Junior, and I'm going to pick Jeff Gordon. I think, Jeff knows the track, loves the track. That is a track that you cannot and be successful at. You have to love it, and, I think Jeff's overdue. I'm going to, again, you can look at the stats and pick the easy favorites and all of that, and that's fun, but I like to take a risk once in a while, and something's telling me that this could be Jeff Gordon's week to finally get back to victory lane, and boy, that would be a huge win for that team.
Yeah, it would be. It would be very huge. First win for the other Hendrick Motorsports shop for 2014. My turn now. I'm like you on the Nationwide side. I fully agree that a Nationwide regular is going to go to victory lane this weekend, or if we can call him a Nationwide regular, because he's not running for Nationwide points anymore, but he's who I associate with the Nationwide series because he ran for points there last year. Ran away with rookie honors in the Nationwide series, and he's due because he needs to avenge the beat and battered and bruised ego of a second-place finish from last March. My pick for the Nationwide race is going to be Kyle Larson. And along that same vein, I'm going to stick with the Kyle and Kyle show, but this time I wanted to pick his brother, but considering Kurt Busch hasn't won at Bristol since the mid-2000s, I believe 2007 at Bristol was the last time the elder Busch brother went to victory lane, I'm going to stick with what I know best at Bristol, and who's better at Bristol than Kyle Busch. I say Rowdy goes to victory lane in the Cup race, but his younger protege stops him on the Nationwide side, and it's going to be a Kyle sort of weekend in Thunder Valley, if you will.
Well, it's, again, I was going to Kyle Busch, but I like to reach a little bit that Jeff Gordon has never won Bristol before, but certainly would not necessarily be considered in the top 3 or 4 favorites at this particular point in time, but I still think he could get it done, and especially if he starts opening up the, it grabs a pole or starts up front. I think that's, if he gets a good solid run in the knockout qualifying and starts anywhere near the front of the field, I would look for Jeff to be a contender all day long.
Then we'll see how it turns out on Saturday and Sunday afternoon at Bristol. It's the Food City 500 for the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series, and that's it for Motorsports Madness. We've said our piece, and for Tom Baker, for James Pike, DJ Everett, Stephen Ovens, Clint Miller, Kyle Souza, Joel Sebastianelli, and everybody who makes it happen here at Speed77 Radio and Race Chaser Online, behind the scenes and behind the microphones, I'm Jacob Seelman, inviting you to check out RaceChaserOnline.com for all the latest from around the world of motorsports, including driver interviews, news, and much, much more. We'll see you back on the air 1 week from tonight as we move to Shoutcast Online Radio for the next edition of Motorsports Madness, live at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. It's Motorsports Madness, and we'll be back here for our final hurrah of the live stream format on Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern for the Stock Car Steel SRI Motorsports Show. Tom and I will be joined by Kyle Souza as we talk late models, modifieds, and much, much more. So the madness is done. We'll see you next time. Keep it off the wall until we meet again. So long, race fans.